Yo, a Bitcoin OG predicted $1 million Bitcoin by 2025. No, this isn't clickbait whatsoever. Something needs to happen in order for that to happen. And we're going to talk about that today. 35% odds on the betting market, Poly market, that the United States makes Bitcoin a strategic reserve asset. And this Bitcoin OG, also known as Adam Back, said that if that were to happen, Bitcoin will hit 7 figures, which is absolutely bonkers, but it makes sense as well. States, according to Dennis Porter, breaking news earlier on today, are racing to make Bitcoin strategic reserve on a state level. So it seems like there's like the game theory is playing out. And by the way, this isn't just a theory. This isn't just a hypothesis. Pennsylvania state representative already introduced a bill that said, hey, listen, we should make Bitcoin a strategic reserve asset on the state level in Pennsylvania. And what we found out from Dennis at the Adopting Bitcoin conference when we interviewed him for about a 6 to 7 minute interview, he said that 10 other states are considering to follow suit. Also earlier today on Dennis's tweets, Senator Cynthia Lummis confirmed that, hey, on the federal level, we shouldn't get left behind. So it seems like all, the states are FOMOing in. On the federal level, they're FOMOing in. What happens if a strategic reserve happens in the United States on an international level? All these other countries are going to look at the US and say, hey, listen, if we don't buy Bitcoin, we're going to get left behind. And you think that Michael Saylor buying $4.6 billion worth of Bitcoin is a lot? I mean, imagine when the federal government steps in when they're with their unlimited money printer. It's going to be absolute bananas. Anyways, guys, it's going to be a great show. I want to introduce my legendary co-host, Optimus Fields, and our guest for today, Seth for Privacy. Seth is with Cake Wallet. Seth, welcome back to the show. I want to get your thoughts on this before I pull up the tweets and the articles. This strategic reserve asset, I mean, it's been going up. Initially, the Poly market odds when Trump announced it in Nashville was around 20%. It's up to 35%. I mean, it's still not, at 50 or 60%, but it continues to grow up. It continues to go up. And, thinking about this 2 years ago when our industry was being attacked left and right by the current administration that is going out of power on January 20th when Trump gets inaugurated, we would have never have imagined this in a million years, right? And then fast forward 2 years later, you have the president wishing Satoshi happy birthday. On tweets, he's saying, I'm going to free Ross. And now he's floating this idea of a strategic Bitcoin reserve. States are saying, no, we want to make strategic Bitcoin reserves on a state level. Nation states are saying, you know what, if the US does it, we're going to do it. Could you have ever imagined this, Seth? I feel like we've made a lot of progress as an industry, at least on the price level. I think from a revolutionary aspect, obviously we want Bitcoin in the hands of individuals. We don't want Bitcoin in the hands of governments.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tricky thing for me, is trying to balance this with how we view Bitcoin as freedom money, because the financial sense for a government to jump in on Bitcoin and use it as a strategic reserve, it's pretty clear. I don't think anyone would argue that cypherpunk or kind of number go up normie. There's no real argument there that Bitcoin has proven itself. So the financial sense for governments to jump in and do this are clear, because the scarcity and the benefits of it being digital are huge for governments, because it's much simpler than physical gold. It's proven itself as a store of value. So I think all of that makes sense. I think just the thing that keeps coming back to my mind is how is this going to impact the freedom money side of Bitcoin? And hopefully it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily have to. And like you said, I mean, they have the money printer. They don't need to necessarily resort to any more extravagant means to get the Bitcoin that they want for a strategic reserve down the line. But that's kind of the thing that is in the back of my mind is what will this mean as far as the government's attacks or support of Bitcoin? Like you said, these last 4 years have been rough, very rough, especially the last 18 months, where it's been clear that governments are trying to prevent self-custody, prevent privacy. But now we have the US government leading the way in saying that, at least as a financial asset, Bitcoin is a valuable tool. So I think that's the main thing, is just keep trying to think about what does this actually mean for the freedom money sides of Bitcoin alongside the never go up side of Bitcoin.
100%. And that's the way that people should see it, right? There is Bitcoin as an investment, and there is Bitcoin as the revolution. And I think, as millennials and Gen Zers that really got the short end of the stick due to 2008 financial crisis, I think a lot of us are here for the revolution, which is, of course, the inevitable separation of money and state. Anyways, I do want to get to today's news. So first, what started all this commotion? Adam Back. Adam Back was cited in the original Satoshi Bitcoin white paper. He tweeted this out yesterday at 11:58 a.m. He said, if the U.S. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve happens, prepare for 7-figure Bitcoin this cycle. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. He is saying that if the United States makes Bitcoin a reserve asset, he's predicting that Bitcoin hits 7 figures. By the way, it doesn't sound too crazy. We're almost at $100,000. That would be a 10x, right? Essentially. I know the law of large numbers comes into play. It's a lot harder for Bitcoin to 10x at 100,000 than it was at 1,000. But still, the discussion changes when nation states essentially legitimize Bitcoin by adopting it as a reserve asset. This is something that's already happened. El Salvador has a public treasury. Anyone could see it. They post their address publicly. I think they buy 1 Bitcoin a day or something like that. So it's already happened. It just, obviously, it would be much more significant if the United States did it, because the United States, on an economical level and on a military level, it's the most powerful country on the face of the planet, right? And it would be insane. It would be bonkers. So I completely agree with Adam Back. This isn't bull juice. This isn't hopium. This is something that could possibly happen. And here's more news. So here's Dennis Porter, massive breaking. I can confirm that BlackRock is now endorsing a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Now, that makes sense. Why does that make sense? Because this is what I always talk about: aligned incentives in Bitcoin. BlackRock is selling Bitcoin, right? I know they're not selling spot Bitcoin. They're selling ETF Bitcoin, right? The revolution is self-custody after all, but still, they're incentivized for number go up, because number go up means more people buy the ETF. More people buy the ETF, more fees that they collect, right? This is what we mean by aligned incentives. Now, it totally makes sense why they would endorse a strategic Bitcoin reserve from a BlackRock level. Also, another piece of breaking news from Dennis. He says, I am now in a race to pass strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation into law before Donald Trump can sign a strategic Bitcoin reserve executive order. To be honest, I'll probably pass this law in multiple states before Trump. The states will lead. Moving on to the next tweet. And you guys are saying, okay, maybe Dennis is, I don't believe him. Personally, guys, I've seen Dennis's proof of work. However you feel about him individually, I judge people based on their proof of work. And his proof of work has shown me that on multiple states, he has successfully passed legislation to protect the right to self-custody and protect the right to mine. Don't take my word for it, verify it yourself. And I know that in Pennsylvania, for example, he was a huge player in convincing the certain representatives over there to introduce a bill for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. This has never happened before, and this was Dennis's doing. Dennis, talked to a lot of these politicians and was saying, look, you should definitely do this, right? So this happened, I think it was last week when we broke this news. We broke news on the Adopting Bitcoin live stream that we did on Friday and Saturday. I had an interview with Dennis, and he confirmed that 10 other states, that's right, 10 other states are looking to do the same as Pennsylvania. Now, has this bill passed? No, but according to the representative that introduced the bill, he said that there is a high likelihood that it will pass because Pennsylvania is a high energy state. We had the CEO of Bitfarms come on the show last week, and he said that they're expanding their mining capability and capacity in Pennsylvania because of the favorable regulatory environment. He also emphasized that this bill by Pennsylvania is bipartisan. So you have both Democrats and Republicans supporting a bill that would make Bitcoin a strategic reserve in the state of Pennsylvania. And it looks like on the federal level, there's a race. Anyways, here's the next tweet by Dennis Porter. He says, breaking, I'm now in a race to pass strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation into law before Donald Trump. The states will lead. Most importantly, the signal here is the Bitcoin Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming, responding to Dennis, saying, so great that we are finally in a race to win the future instead of a race to the bottom of the pile. It kind of confirms what Dennis is saying. I mean, this is a U.S. Senator responding to Dennis. This is not like, just a bunch of Bitcoiners on Twitter just talking shit. This is real stuff. So yeah, I mean, this is crazy. I could never have imagined this. This is a total 180 of where we were 6 months ago, where me and Opti were really talking about it like, yo, Opti, should we relocate to El Salvador? Because I think there's a high possibility that they'll make Bitcoin self-custody illegal in the United States. Complete 180, right? So, the Trump administration has yet to be sworn into office. They're not in power yet. That happens on January 20th. We'll see what happens. He has promised he's going to free Ross on day one. And the last thing I'll share, I forgot to share this, guys, because the most accurate when it came to predicting the 2024 United States election. What happened there? Thank you, Opti. According to Polymarket, and remember, guys, the reason that the betting odds are so accurate is because polls could be manipulated. When it comes to putting money behind your idea, it's a totally different conversation. And this is why betting odds historically have been more accurate at predicting elections than the so-called polls, right? So according to the betting odds by one of the largest, betting markets in the world, Polymarket, Trump will create, it gives it a 34% chance that Trump creates a national Bitcoin reserve. Now, I know what a lot of you guys are saying. Nico, that's a letdown. WTF, that's not a good number. I'm not happy. I mean, if I told you 4 years ago there was a 34% chance that the United States would create a strategic Bitcoin reserve, you would have been like, I'll take that. That sounds amazing, right? So yeah, this is insane. Reality is stranger than fiction. And boy, has this been a complete 180 compared to the current administration that has been relatively hostile. One last little bit before I pass it on to Seth. It seems like Howard Lupnick, again, according to the Polymarket odds, has a high probability of being appointed to some position in the Trump administration. Remember, Howard Lupnick not only manages the reserves for Tether and their investments, Counter Fitzgerald, but also he was on the Pompliano podcast not too long ago, where Pomp was asking him, so you're going to buy Bitcoin? He's like, I'm going to buy tens of millions of Bitcoin, then hundreds of millions of Bitcoin. So could you imagine that the potential future U.S. Treasury is a Bitcoiner that holds hundreds of millions of Bitcoin? I mean, you can only kind of use a little bit of common sense to have a idea of what the regulatory environment is going to be in the next 4 years or so. Anyways, I'm going to pass it on to Seth. Seth, I know we got to emphasize this, right? On the price level, this is extremely bullish. On the revolution level, it's a little bit dangerous because people get comfortable with the ETFs. People are like, why should I take self-custody? There's a positive regulatory environment. But what are your thoughts in terms of the bullish aspect?
Yeah, I mean, the most encouraging news out of all this, honestly, is just that so far, at least, it seems that this new administration will be, at worst, just not aggressively anti-crypto and anti-Bitcoin. And I think that's the most important thing that I'm excited about. Like the National Reserve, like we talked about, I think it makes financial sense, and I'm not too surprised. And I think that if they do follow through on that, they line things up really well to make sure that they can keep the onrush of funds within the legacy financial system. I mean, I think I don't want to say it's a conspiracy theory or that I'm a conspiracy theorist, but the timing of the ETFs all happening before this change. And I don't think anyone knew that Trump would be elected at that point, but that all being in place, that kind of traditional financial system infrastructure to allow people to buy Bitcoin, but not actually use or hold Bitcoin themselves, it fits well with what the US government would want out of this. Because ultimately what they want is they want to cement the supremacy of the dollar, and they want to ensure that they continue getting income from anybody using Bitcoin as much as possible. And so I don't see that changing, and I think the ETFs are a good tool for them. Unfortunately, like you mentioned, they're not a tool for revolution in the sense of actually providing people freedom to transact how they want. They can provide financial freedom in the sense that they can be a good investment tool that gets you more fiat at the end of the day, but very different than when we're talking about the revolutionary aspects of Bitcoin, as you put it. So 100%. I think the most important thing that I'm curious to see what happens with is there going to be any continued pushback on self-custody to try and get more of the Bitcoin? If there is this rush for Bitcoin, and as we all know, it's an extremely scarce asset that seems to be getting more and more scarce as more people are trying to buy large amounts of it daily, and that's even before a Federal Reserve or something kicks in. Will they take any drastic steps to increase their access to Bitcoin, or to ensure that anyone who uses Bitcoin does so in a way that continues to feed back into the governmental system through simple ways like taxation, which obviously that's not going away, unfortunately, or through more advanced ways like confiscation or something like that, which I don't think there's any signs that will be happening at this point. And even in like the early legislature that I think Senator Loomis was involved in, it has explicit protections around lawfully held Bitcoin. But the US government has a lot of say in what is lawful and what's not lawful. So again, I'm not going to put my hope for Bitcoin as a revolutionary tool in what the US is doing from a Federal Reserve standpoint, or even what policymakers are saying. But it is helpful to get a gauge of kind of what's the environment going to be like. And it seems like at least we've been bought 4 more years of time to build, to improve Bitcoin, to improve the tools that we built around it, to make wallets better, to make self-custody easier. And it seems like this administration will be much more friendly, and at least be not aggressively anti-Bitcoin, which is a huge win. And that is a huge win for the revolutionary side of Bitcoin if that holds and if that actually pans out.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's, I completely agree with you, Seth. Like, we just want to be left alone. That's what it boils down to. I think for the last, what was it? 3.5 years, Opti was like I was like holding him back, but essentially like we tried so hard to just not get into the political discussion. But I remember the episode that I broke essentially when they arrested the Samurai Wallet developers. I got so upset because it was like, wait a second, hold on. Like all these banks, HSBC, TD Bank, get fined for money laundering, but for someone that writes open source software and he has no control over who uses it, someone uses that open source, and it's a small percentage, to commit a crime, somehow he's held responsible. And I was like, you know what? F that, Trump 2024. And then he goes and he's like, I'll protect the right to self-custody. I'll protect the right I'm going to free Ross and have fun with your Bitcoins. And, I'll stop the CBDCs. And I'm like, we have no choice but to get behind the orange man, because, it's like we were forced to throw our hat in the ring. I don't think any Bitcoiner would have, willingly got into discussing politics or talking about, because we weren't interested about that. I think Bitcoiners inherently want the separation of money and state, but we were kind of forced into a corner to kind of speak up and to say something, So yeah, I agree. I think this is very positive from an investment standpoint, from number go up standpoint, from a revolutionary aspect. We should be very, very cautious, and we have to continue to remind people, not your keys, not your cheese, not your keys, not your Bitcoin. Anyways, Opti, what's your take on this before we get to the numbers?
Yeah, well, first, shout out to the chat, because I did just kind of verify this. It looks like Howard Lutnick is being nominated for Commerce Secretary. So that just came out like, I don't know, right when we started the show.
That's nuts.
So, not what's it? Treasurer Secretary or whatever it was. He's Commerce. But hey, there is the very same signal that there is actual Bitcoiners in the Trump administration. I think that kind of leads to what Seth was saying, that at the very least, we're going to have 4 years of having like a runway, some cover here versus being fought for the last 4 years. So obviously that's going to be great for the Bitcoin industry at large. And then just kind of going back to the Adam Back tweet, you know, as a Bitcoiner and someone that is constantly bull-tarded, and I'm always, you know, I am like the most bullish person always, and I do always get cake on my face. You know, it does feel like $1 million Bitcoin in this bull run does seem a little outlandish, but again,
no, I disagree.
I know, Nico. Hold on.
A strategic
that's
Bitcoin reserve asset,
Nico, that's where I was going. Where I was going. Like, you know, where things are right now, looking at the charts, you're like, yeah, $1 million Bitcoin. Like, you guys are smoking the hopium. But if Bitcoin does get announced to be a Bitcoin strategic stockpile or strategic reserve in America, then it really is the meme. Like, this time is different. And when you really look at this this leg up of the bull run and compare it to the old Bitcoin bull runs, you know, we have 3 of them. It is lining up very well with 2020 and the 2017 bull run. And we all know what happened in 2021 with the last bull run. So if we are entering kind of a 2017 bull run, like $1 million Bitcoin really isn't like that far-fetched of a conversational starter here. Like it's in the ballpark range of what we've seen Bitcoin do in the past. Obviously big numbers now. We're all kind of thinking like, oh, it can't run that fast. But that really goes into my last point where, you know, we have the heuristic here in Bitcoin and Bitcoin price movements and what happens in Bitcoin, that it usually does the exact opposite of what everyone thinks it's going to do. And right now, all of us Bitcoiners are like, dude, it's going to hit like 100K, 200K, and that's it. And that's kind of the consensus right now. So, hey, I don't know. It does feel like this time is different. There's a lot of new things on the table. The conversation around Bitcoin has fundamentally changed as far as I'm concerned since Larry Fink has came into Bitcoin. You know, they're buying their own ETF. They don't just have an ETF. And now Bitcoin is being looked at as a legitimate thing to have in your portfolio. And I think that does fundamentally change if the US does add a strategic reserve stockpile and then states either follow suit or front run that. Like this does feel different this time around. And again, you know, $1 million Bitcoin isn't really that far out of the realm of possibility. But, you know, what do we know? It's only like a 10x from here. Bitcoin's done that before. So I think I'm going to fundamentally publicly switch. I'm all for $1 million Bitcoin in 2025. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. All right, everybody, before we get into the numbers, the news, we have so much content lined up for you guys, and we're going to talk about privacy during the culture segment. I do want to give a very special shout out to our lead sponsor. Of course, I'm talking about Bitcoin Well. Bitcoin Well is the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. Enable your independence with the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin on-chain or via Lightning Network in Canada and the USA. What makes Bitcoin Well different than all the other on-ramps is that it's automatic self-custody. What does that mean? That means that when you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, as soon as the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. They do not allow you to leave your Bitcoin on the exchange, which perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state. Head over to bitcoinwell.com to get started. Also, if you're a higher net worth individual looking for white glove service, check out Bitcoin Well Infinite. This is tailored for people who want to buy $50,000 worth of Bitcoin or more. It's a complete white glove experience. What does that mean? That means you'll have your own representative. Whenever you want to call him, you want to text him or her, and you want to say, hey, I want to buy Bitcoin at this price, or hey, I have some questions about self-custody. This is the service for you. I highly, highly recommend it. Head over to bitcoinwell.com/OTC, or you could personally email me at nico@bitcoinwell.com, and I will personally take care of you and hook you up with your own Bitcoin Well Infinite representative so you can make large Bitcoin transactions. Also, every time you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, you earn something called Bitcoin Well points, and you could use those points towards the Wishing Well contest, which we'll do live for you guys right now. Get your Lightning wallets ready. First person to scan the QR code has won 500 sats. If you use promo code Simply BTC. Again, Simply BTC. To sign up to bitcoinwell.com today, you get 3 tosses into the wishing well for an opportunity to win up to 1 million sats. What are you waiting for? Visit bitcoinwell.com today. All right, everybody, let's hit the numbers. Lots to talk about. I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, Stampseed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed words really secure? Stampseed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of writing them down on paper. Don't do that. Paper sucks. You want to literally stamp your seed into this plate of titanium. Your words are actually stamped into the metal plate with this hammer. So once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and your pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They are also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and most importantly, because this is generational wealth, time-proof. All things that paper is not, allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin for the long haul. I mean, here is the plate that they crushed. They put in water. They put a blowtorch to it. And as you can see, the words have survived. Stamp your seed on Stampseed. And you can use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on their store. Head over to stampseed.com today. Everybody, so I'm assuming you're gonna have grandchildren and whatever. Eventually you're gonna want to pass on your Bitcoin to them, right? Can you imagine that very uncomfortable conversation when you're like 80 years old or 90 years old and your grandchildren come up to you and they're like, "Grandpapa, I heard you bought Bitcoin at 90K, like, are you gonna pass it on to me?" And you like tell them, you're like, "No." And then they're like, "Why?" It's like, "Because I wrote down my seed words on paper." And they're gonna look at you and they're gonna be like, "You're an idiot. Why didn't you get a stamp seed?" Get yourself a stamp seed today. Use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off. Anyways, at the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $92,780. Block height, 871,066. Sats per dollar, 1,078. Bitcoin market cap. We are sitting pretty at 1.84 trillion. Bitcoin price in gold, 35.1 ounces. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 10.012%. Percentage issued, 94.21%. Decline from all-time high, negative 0.7%. Damn. Whoa. We're sitting at 92,724 Bitcoin. Blah, blah. Well, I hope we break all-time highs, man. We're so close. I feel it. We can touch it. Anyways, realize monetary inflation continuing to take fiat currencies to absolute school, 1.21%. The grand scheme of things, we're just getting started. Anyways, guys, you guys know I love talking about the Overton window. And guys, we have not only broken the Overton window, we've shattered the Overton window. The only thing that's missing in this equation for the full circle to complete is Michael Saylor joining Joe Rogan. That's the only thing that's missing, because he's done the full circuit. And he just recently joined PBD. If you guys don't follow him, PBD is the guy, the entrepreneur, content creator behind the Valuetainment YouTube channel. Great content. I love consuming it. Very great. Very good. Amazing. So he joins PBD, and Saylor said some pretty crazy things, which are not crazy to us Bitcoiners, but I have the clip for you guys, and then we'll discuss it. Let's check it out. Here we go.
Was a $90 billion asset class in March of 2000 when I was first looking at it. And then by August, it was about $180 billion asset class. And right now, 4 years later, it's $1.8 trillion asset class. And I think it's going to 18 trillion, then 180 trillion, then it's going to go beyond that. So I think it's a very simple thing. I think Bitcoin is going to grow from 0.1% of the money in the world to 7% of the money in the world over the next 21 years. And of course, you should just go long and keep buying it.
0.1% to, you said 7%?
Yeah, it'll go from like 1.8 trillion to $240 trillion, and it'll go up 29% a year ARR. That is my base case.
And I've heard you say that in 21 years it's going to be at $13 million
That
per
takes you to
Bitcoin.
13 million a coin.
13 million a coin
13 million a coin.
at 29%.
Every Bitcoin you don't buy is going to cost you $13 million, my friend.
Every
Think hard.
Bitcoin. So let me ask this
Your
question.
4 Bitcoin Ferrari is going to be a $55 million thing.
Let me ask this question.
Choose wisely.
So right
Yeah.
now, your what's MicroStrategy worth today? What's the number? 74 billion? Whatever the number was, right? Can you look up MicroStrategy market cap? I'm just curious. Okay, $73 billion today. If you're saying 0.1% today, it's going to go to 7%. That's 700x, right? So if it's 90,000 today, if I do 13 million divided by 90,000,
Well,
you're expecting to 144x MicroStrategy in 21 years. If I do 144 times 73 billion, you're estimating to be a $10.5 trillion company in 21 years. Is that correct? Give or take.
yeah, I guess with that math, yeah. Bitcoin goes from 90,000 to 13 million. So multiply 13 divided by 90,000, it gets you to a big number.
You were given it.
But Elon's forecasting 30 trillion. So we're still chasing after the robots and the self-flying cars.
So
Dude. I mean, wild. What is a $10 trillion company? That's insane. I think the market cap of like the biggest companies on earth right now are like about $1 trillion. So, I mean, it doesn't sound too unbelievable. I think it sounds unbelievable for a company like MicroStrategy, because before MicroStrategy changed, they really like started this kind of Bitcoin strategy back in 2020. I never forget the 2021 Bitcoin conference in Miami, where Saylor made his announcement. MicroStrategy essentially was going sideways since the 90s. They peaked in the 90s. And the stock has just been going sideways. And then Saylor even said, like, I was thinking about retiring because there was just like no way of it, like, whatever. And as soon as they adopted the Bitcoin strategy, they have outperformed every company in the S&P 500, including, I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly because I'm from Miami, I don't care, including NVIDIA, right? So, like, I mean, bro, like, the proof is in the work. The proof is in the work. And, this is, I think Saylor is going to be one of the wealthiest men in the world. And I think MicroStrategy is going to be one of the largest companies in the world, just because of the amount of Bitcoin that they own. I think, he wanted that 1% of the supply. Now he's at 330,000 Bitcoin. I think he's aiming for 1 million Bitcoin. I don't know if he'll get there, but with the current infinite money glitch that he's using, he's accumulating an insane amount of Bitcoin. He doesn't care that he's buying at all-time highs. The last 50,000 Bitcoin purchase was around this level. He doesn't give a flying F. He's like, I just want more. Anyway, Seth, what's your take on this?
Do we know if MicroStrategy actually does anything other than buy Bitcoin?
No one knows.
Everyone talks about MicroStrategy now and like buying MicroStrategy stock, and it's like all the rage in my Twitter feed or Twitter feed, whatever we call it these days. And I don't really know what they do, so it's a fascinating case of this man found his market and influencer niche, and he's leaned into it. Yeah, I mean, as I've said before when I've been on the show, like, I'm not the price speculation guy, so I don't know what to make of their wild predictions of what's going to happen with the price. But I think an interesting thing with Bitcoin is that you can benefit from basically doing nothing and just buying Bitcoin, which I don't think is the right approach. And I think that everyone out there watching this, there are ways that you can actually contribute back to Bitcoin, whether it's just through education or talking about the benefits of Bitcoin as an investment, but also really as freedom money with the people around you. And you don't just have to be that guy who hodls and talks about price publicly. But it's been fascinating to watch him basically resurrect a zombie company purely by buying Bitcoin and contributing nothing else, as far as I know, via his company. So it's a weird setup. He's not someone that I particularly admire, but he makes some bold claims, and financially he's made good decisions so far. So it's interesting to follow.
Yeah, no, and just kind of like, obviously we don't have the war chest and the means and the resources that someone like Saylor has, right? Where he he's able to get like the I don't know if you guys know this, but the interest rates that he's getting to borrow all this absurd amount of money to buy Bitcoin, it's like near zero, right? So like we don't have that as individuals. MicroStrategy is getting these amazing deals. He's like leveraging the debt fiat system to just to essentially attack it in a way, kind of, but just a reminder, everyone, MicroStrategy does not custody their Bitcoin. They have their Bitcoin with Coinbase, right? So in 8 out of the 9 ETFs, that's the same story. They all custody their Bitcoin with Coinbase. That's not ideal. That is not a good situation. A good situation would be not only individuals custodying their Bitcoin, but also, institutions and companies custodying their Bitcoin as well. That's what differentiates Bitcoin with, right? The ability for you to custody very large amounts and the ability for you to send very large amounts as well without having to go through a third party. Anyways, Opti, what's your take on this, man? I mean, this is absolutely bonkers. And shout out to PBD for having him. Again, like a normie is hearing this and they're just like, holy effing, like what the F is going on? This is nuts. Or they think he's nuts, but a small percentage of them, he's making Bitcoiners every time he goes on these mainstream podcasts.
Yeah. Well, shouts out to PBD, because I think this is like the third time that Saylor's been on the pod, and you can tell that he likes him, and that's why he's kind of bringing him back on. But I do find it very interesting. There's actually 2 points. The first one, I found it interesting in that podcast that PBD like instantly went to the MicroStrategy stock and being like, wait, it's going to be how much, like doing the calculations of like, wait, maybe I should buy your stock, bro. Cause like it's going to go up that much. But like in that conversation, he's kind of, I don't know if he's relegating. I haven't watched all the Saylor PBD podcasts, so I'm not really sure what PBD's thoughts are on Bitcoin. And I think by that back and forth where Saylor's like, yeah, your, 4 Bitcoin Ferrari is going to be $55 million one day. Like, well, every Bitcoin you don't buy is $13 million. So I think there's probably kind of some pushback from PBD, and he's not fully convinced on Bitcoin. And he's kind of more like, wait, maybe I just buy MicroStrategy and that's how I increase my purchasing power. So I found that very interesting. And then obviously kind of what Seth was saying, like, who knows where the price is actually going, and who knows whether these numbers are correct. But it is very interesting that Saylor's like, yeah, this is like my base bear case here, and it could blow right past that. And knowing that PBD is one of the biggest content creators right now, and so by bringing Saylor back, there has to be more people kind of waking up to the Bitcoin thesis and being like, oh, maybe I need to buy some Bitcoin, and I need to have it as part of my investment strategy. Obviously, we think of it more than just an investment. We think it's the best money ever. It's the perfect money, as Saylor's constantly saying. And if things are getting as worse as a lot of us speculate, it's going to be maybe the only money if the fiat currencies start to actually blow up and the bond markets blow up. And so by getting out there, Nico hasn't said it yet, but by Saylor going on PBD, he is shifting the Overton window, and you just love to see it. And then I did see this clip this morning, just kind of scrolling Twitter. And personally, when I heard this, I'm like, man, I could feel the bullish tingles. I'm like, okay, like I like these numbers. Like, okay, keep shilling these big numbers out there, Saylor. Who knows where the price is going? But if that math does play out, like that's absolutely insane numbers. What was it? 144x or 700x? Like, that's just mind-blowing numbers, and I don't think our brains can fathom what that actually means, especially as Bitcoiners. But I do like that soundbite of every Bitcoin you don't buy is basically costing you $13 million. Like, that's a strong meme right there, and I think we should push that a little harder on a lot of people. It's like people don't understand the opportunity cost of not buying Bitcoin right now. They're kind of just looking at it on like a year-to-year level. It's like, oh, I could have gained 40% on my portfolio if I just bought Bitcoin. But in the long run, it's like, wait, I am losing out on $13 million. Like that's some incredible FOMO right there. So, Saylor, hey, he's going out there again, as Seth said, and I've said this in the past and I did kind of get some flack. Who really knows what MicroStrategy is doing, and it is kind of like MicroStrategy.
I think they're a software company.
No, they are. They're allegedly like a business.
Let's be honest with ourselves.
Yeah, allegedly like an business analytics company here. But it is interesting, and I tweeted this before, and I think I've said it on the show, and either it just went under the radar and no one really caught what I was saying. But Seth just said the same thing, where it's like, it's almost like MicroStrategy was a zombie company until they started to stack Bitcoin, and now they're outperforming the S&P 500, and so that signal has to be spreading for a lot of people, and they have to at least be waking up to this idea that I need to add Bitcoin to my company portfolio if I want to maintain the lead that I currently have. And, Saylor, I think, is putting on a masterclass out there. Obviously, there is other concerns maybe of just how much Bitcoin he is stacking, and is it a good thing that one person is stacking that much? Obviously, I'm not one here to watch someone's pockets, but I think that signal has to start to catch on. And, if people want to compete, they have to be stacking Bitcoin. And Saylor is head and shoulders above everyone else. He's just winning the game way too hard. It seems way too easy for him. And it's only a matter of time, personally, that I think other huge CEOs and, trillion-dollar companies start to stack Bitcoin. And so the game theory, not only on a nation state level, but a corporate level, it's heating up. And for us individuals, for the retail out there, it's like, hey, when the tide raises all boats, it's a good thing for us. But this is why we have Seth on for the culture today, so we can talk about other things besides the price and, privacy concerns, and how we can ensure that Bitcoin becomes and maintains the freedom money aspects that we really love.
100%. All right, guys, we have tons of content left for you guys, so let's get to news. We'll be right back.
Very special shout out to our sponsor, Compass Mining. They make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone, from beginners to experienced investors. Their turnkey miners gets you online and hashing within 48 hours, making it easier than ever to start your mining journey. Plus, with their active marketplace, you can resell your miner at any time, adding flexibility and value to your investment. Visit their website to access a wealth of resources, learning everything you need to know about Bitcoin mining. Take your first step into the world of Bitcoin mining with confidence. Discover more at compassmining.io. Again, compassmining.io, and see how Compass Mining can power your success. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US, and it integrates seamlessly with their free app called Envoy. Passport is fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet designed with a UX reminiscent of a classic feature phone, so you'll know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. It's also air-gapped, meaning Bitcoin stays offline, never touching an internet connection. It's Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, air-gap security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes with Passport at foundation.xyz/simply. Get peace of mind for your piece of Bitcoin.
All right, everybody. So it doesn't come with Opti, but if you use the promo code SIMPLY, you will get a discount to the Passport by Foundation devices. This is the perfect device to give to people that perhaps are a little bit intimidated by self-custody. Passport does not sacrifice security for convenience. It makes cold storage Bitcoin convenient, but also not sacrificing security. Again, does not come with Opti, but you will get a discount by using promo code SIMPLY. Anyways, let's get to today's news. So this is pretty crazy, but first, I saw some people mentioning that they missed the meme review in the chat. So before I get to that, I found this absolutely hilarious posted by Kraken, and it says, "My employment contract when Bitcoin hits 100K." All right, moving on.
Oh, that was loud.
Isn't that hilarious? Here we go.
I'm glad I'm not wearing headphones. I would have had
Oh,
knee damage.
man.
Blowing
otherwise.
out the
That's
audience
legit.
ears.
I'm sorry, guys. Anyway, shout out to we just broke 2,000 live viewers. If you guys are enjoying the show on YouTube, on Rumble or X, make sure to smash the like button. Consider sharing the video. Really, really helps in getting the message out there. I found this really, really interesting. And perhaps this might not be very popular with our audience, because our audience is obviously we're obviously Bitcoiners, but I will say that this is this is very good for the industry as a whole. Whether you like it or not, Coinbase is by and large, by far the largest cryptocurrency exchange on the planet. They contributed tremendously towards fighting off Elizabeth Warren and her goons. Also, Satoshi Action Fund by Dennis Porter and the Bitcoin Policy Institute. Shout out David Zell. But Coinbase really, really led the charge. They spent a lot of time and money in Washington, really trying to educate regulators and whatnot. So this is a really, really good sign to what Seth was saying in the beginning of the show. We don't want any kind of special favors. We just want to be left the F alone. That's all we're asking for. Because by just Bitcoin by itself, its incentives are just going to rule today. Yes, we might make an all-time high before the end of the show. We just broke $93,035. You are listening to Simply Bitcoin Live. Smash the like button. Anyways, here's a Wall Street Journal article. It says, Trump to meet privately with Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong. President-elect Donald Trump is meeting with the CEO of cryptocurrency exchange platform Coinbase Monday, according to people familiar with the matter. The duo is expected to discuss personal appointments for his second administration. The meeting between Trump and Brian Armstrong would mark the first time the two have met since Election Day and comes as Trump continues to fill out his cabinet and other senior posts. Trump, formerly a crypto skeptic, has turned into a vocal supporter of the industry. And then there's a paywall. But you guys get the general gist of it.
Send me the link, Nico. Send me the link. Maybe
here.
I can bypass it.
Yeah, here we go. Boom. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of like a continuation on the trend. And then the other topic that I wanted to bring up on the news segment is this one, which I find absolutely effing hilarious. Because if we did this, we would go to jail. So the Pentagon fails 7th audit in a row. Let's get some more of the details. The Pentagon on Friday failed its 7th audit in a row, with the nation's largest government agency still unable to fully account for its more than $824 billion budget. Though officials stress they're making good progress towards a clean audit in 2020. Hey, could you imagine responding to the IRS with that response? Just like, hey, you know what? We messed up. It's an $824 million audit, but we promise on the 7th year we'll get that right. Right? Like, this isn't, it's rules for thee, but not for me, right? So anyways, this is supposedly what Elon and Vivek are going in there to fix. We shall see. They are taking on the administrative state, which is fueled by the fiat money printer. Let's see if they're successful. But I mean, again, it's kind of like a double standard. And it feels, honestly, as long as governments have the money printer, it's like they've taken their populace hostage. And I'll quote the book, The Sovereign Individual, because I think it's very applicable to this specifically. The internet, so the government sees their citizens as tax cattle. The internet has given them wings, right? And essentially, I think that's what's happening. We've seen the disintermediation of information over the last, 5 years or so. It's been bonkers, right? And look at how much they've done to try to fight it. Look at how much they've tried to censor platforms like X, platforms like YouTube, platforms like they've tried to stifle speech, which again, according to the First Amendment is illegal, right? But look at what happened with the Twitter files. It became public that elements of the U.S. government were colluding with private companies to censor certain types of political speech. Right now, imagine if they get their hands on central bank digital currencies. Are you saying that they're not going to use that same power against their citizens? And then at the same time, they want us to report every $600 transaction, but the Pentagon is failing $800 million worth of audits for 7 years in a row. And their response is, we'll try better next year. We're getting close to figuring it out. Like, that's a double standard. That isn't a government represented by the people for the people. That's a government by the government for the government, which I would say is the definition of tyranny. Anyways, I want to get Seth's opinion on this and then Opti.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a ridiculous example of how the military-industrial complex that, unfortunately, we built in the U.S. and offloaded to so many other countries around the world has a massive amount of control around the government and around the political system as well, because so much money gets poured into that military-industrial complex that they can just have revolving door policies where they keep moving politicians into their businesses. They're the defense companies that are making hundreds of billions of dollars every year. And that report was $824 billion budget that they haven't been able to find for 7 straight audits. And it is wild because especially under this last administration, there was a huge push to grow the IRS because they weren't happy that they were getting enough taxes from us average individuals, with things like the ridiculous $600 limit and when we're sending money on Venmo or PayPal, and they're wanting to control every last dollar and cent that we are moving, that we are sending back and forth, that we are using to buy used stuff off of other people on Facebook Marketplace or whatever. Like these ridiculous platforms where they understand that while the internet is supposed to give us wings, when it doesn't have proper privacy guarantees, it actually just ends up giving the government better chains to put around us if we don't push back. And that's one of the reasons why I think Bitcoin as freedom money is so important, because it should give us that freedom back. It should give us freedom from really tyrannical oppression that we have right now, even though in the US we're politically quite free. And I know that I'm very blessed to be in the US because we do have a lot of protections that other countries don't, and a lot of financial privilege that other countries don't. But the government is starting to use more and more of the tools that they have to repress dissent and to get tighter control of the financial system. So Bitcoin as freedom money is more vital than ever. And these kind of tax insanities show that, because we don't have control over the government. The government generally has control over us, unfortunately.
100%. I think that will always be the case as long as governments have the money printer. The incentive isn't there. The incentive for a lot of these bureaucrats and politicians is to get as close as humanly possible to the money printer. They don't need to do good by their constituents, right? But if you separate money from state, their only form of raising revenue is via direct taxation, right? And that changes the conversation. You're going to be a lot nicer to, the asks of your constituents versus kind of finding this sly roundabout way to tax them via currency debasement, right? So very, very kind of interesting conversation. Anyways, I do want to pass it on to Opti. Guys, by the way, we are on the verge of making an all-time high. I have Satoshi, the Bitcoin chicken, ready to cluck. He's right next to me.
Nico, I think at least TradingView is telling me we did just break it.
We did. Is it confirmed?
Yeah, it's running. I can see it right here. It's running. It's running.
We're at 93,500.
93,638. So that's all time high.
So we have broken all time. So we have broken all-time highs. I'm gonna put it on the ticker. Congratulations, everybody! You've earned your stripes. Anyways, Opti, what's your take on this?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm going to start with the audit. Obviously, they don't want to audit that balance because they do well with the lack of transparency. But when you do compare it to kind of what El Salvador is doing, and you can see at least on the blockchain, there's some trust, I guess, there that they are actually stacking all that Bitcoin, etc. It's a totally different paradigm. If America was as transparent as the Bitcoin blockchain, I think it would be a totally different conversation. And, personally, as the reigning tinfoil hat guy on the show, I don't think they want us to be transparent with their audit books. And there's that. But the first kind of story about Trump meeting Brian Armstrong, look, guys, I am not a fan of Coinbase. I think Brian Armstrong has been actively fighting Bitcoin the real Bitcoin here for a lot of years. And so personally, I'm not a fan of Brian Armstrong, but with that being said, I think those conversations are a good thing, and Trump talking to people within the industry is a good thing. Though I am a little concerned that, Trump's probably going to get a shitcoin shill from Brian Armstrong.
Totally.
But I mean, hey, maybe Trump's just asking Brian Armstrong to put what's a World Liberty coin on Coinbase.
Can you imagine that conversation? Like, all right, Brian, listen, it's gonna be amazing.
Pump my bags, bro.
Trump coin. It's gonna be amazing, right? Like for sure but like I would say this is what I would say. Like I'm personally a free market maximalist, and I don't, because I've seen this with a lot of the Bitcoin community, which is kind of like this idea of like thinking that the government is gonna step in and hoping that they're going to choose what the winners and losers are in terms of cryptos. Like, no. Like, let the free market do what the free market does best. We don't need government intervention. That's my take. And perhaps that's an unpopular take. And also another unpopular take with some Bitcoiners that I have too is like, yes, we are Bitcoin only. That's what we are, Simply Bitcoin. However, if you want to buy whatever you want to buy, go, so be it. That's all you. Like, that is completely your decision. You're an adult, and you have every right to do so. That's another kind of like, because I've seen a lot of maxis on Twitter. It's like, you are, stupid if you buy this cryptocurrency. Like, let people decide what they want to do. It's their money, right? Like, that's totally your prerogative. So, I would say let's let the free market do what the free market does best. We believe that Bitcoin has the best incentives, as the best, it's just the best one. So let's let the free market decide, and we'll see what happens. Let's see where the dust settles, right? Anyways, guys, before we move on,
before you move on, take off the ticker because we're not at all-time high anymore.
All right, I'm gonna put away Satoshi Bitcoin.
It's at 93.3 now. So okay. Hey, it was good while it lasted.
Oh, it was a nice little wick. Anyways, guys, before we move on to the culture segment, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Guys, Simply Bitcoin is powered by our sponsors. So the best way to support us is check out our partners. We're very, very careful on who we choose to partner with. So first up, I want to give a very special shout out to HIVE Digital Technologies. As the first ever public miner, HIVE's been battle tested through every possible market. And as the first with an AI strategy, HIVE continues to redefine the future of sustainable computing. Gotta also casually drop this in here. HIVE consistently tops the industry in Bitcoin mined per exahash. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're changing the game. Learn more by following them at HIVE Digital Tech or at hivedigital.com. Also, check them out. They're a publicly traded company on NASDAQ. Check out their ticker, HIVE. So HIVE. Anyways, guys, moving on to our next sponsor, BitBlockBoom. Guys, this is going to be one of the best Bitcoin conferences of 2025. It's a pure Bitcoin conference. It's going to be April 3rd, April 4th, April 5th, and April 6th in Dallas, Texas. The entire Simply Bitcoin crew and team will be there. Dante, Rustin, Nico, Opti, Sophie. It's going to be at Jacob. It's going to be absolutely epic. It's going to be 4 days of pure Bitcoin signal by pure Bitcoiners. It's going to be incredible. You guys don't want to miss this. We're going to be live streaming it from the Simply Bitcoin channel. And we really, really hope to see you guys in person in Dallas, Texas at BitBlockBoom. So get your tickets now because the prices do go up as time goes by. Scan the QR code today. And if you use promo code BBB21, you get $100 off your tickets. All right, everybody, let's hit the culture. All right, everybody, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, the Orange Pull app, the Bitcoin social layer. Stack friends who stack sats. Join the 13,629 Bitcoiners that are currently on the app. So what is the Orange Pull app? The Orange Pull app is the perfect resource for when you're on the go, or perhaps you're in your city and you don't know any Bitcoiners around you. You pull up the Orange Pull app, has a really clever geographical feature, and it will show you the Bitcoiners that are geographically close to you, allowing you to send them a message and to make that connection. So if you're traveling to a conference and perhaps you don't know anything, you don't know what to do that night, you pull up the Orange Pill app, it'll give you the ability to not only message the Bitcoiners that are around you, but also to see what Bitcoin only events are happening as well. Check out the Orange Pill app today by scanning the QR code on your screen or checking the link in the video description. Anyways, opening up the conversation, want to take advantage of Seth for Privacy being on the show today. Seth has contributed an enormous amount of not only content, but also just work for advocating for privacy in Bitcoin. He's also a supporter of Monero as well, which is like the quintessential privacy cryptocurrency also. So Seth, welcome to the show. Happy to have you on today. And you're currently with Cake Wallet. So guys, if you want to check out Cake Wallet, go to cakewallet.com today.
Yeah, man. Thank y'all so much for having me on. It's been fun. I always just love the lighthearted approach here on Simply Bitcoin. So it's just always an absolute blast to be able to sit with y'all through this. I got to be here for All Time High, so it's a good day to be jumping in. But really excited to chat more about privacy as always. I know it's kind of a meme. It's at this point that whenever I'm on something, I'm either talking about privacy or now since silent payments have been the big thing for me over the past couple of years, everyone just assumes that I'm going to talk about silent payments, which I will a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to hear about that. That sounds like a great idea. So where should we start this off? Opti, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Yeah, I mean, Seth just brought up privacy. We do have, Seth has a podcast as well, and there's, a new kind of conversation. It's an old conversation that is starting to rear its head again. But let's start with privacy first and foremost, since it's already been brought up. Seth, as someone that works in privacy, it's literally in your name, Seth for Privacy. What is the current state for privacy, and what are you concerned? Like, what are you watching, and where is your head at in regards to privacy on Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about privacy on Bitcoin, I think there's a lot of reasons for hope and optimism, and a lot of reasons for concern as well. So this is, I feel like, kind of always where we've been in the Bitcoin ecosystem, because there's a broad set of people deciding what should and should not be included in Bitcoin, a broad set of people developing around Bitcoin, researching new approaches that can be taken, and so we always get a lot of different routes that can happen, a lot of different paths. And we've come to a lot of, no pun intended, kind of forks in the road on what path we're going to take forward for Bitcoin, especially when it comes to whether or not it can be free to money for the individual. And I think when we're talking privacy, the most exciting thing that's been happening recently, Nico hit on the Samurai wallet shutdown in April, and that we've covered quite a bit today already, that there's been just kind of a broad crackdown on privacy in Bitcoin and in the broader cryptocurrency space over the last really 12 months. But in the wake of that, people have been trying to figure out where do we go next. And thankfully, one of the cool tools that has happened, it was introduced into the space as a proposal a couple of years ago, but has finally become a reality actually in Cake Wallet. It's one of the reasons why I was so excited to jump in and join the Cake Wallet team a couple months ago, was that silent payments is here, and silent payments is one of these beautiful things because it doesn't require any changes to Bitcoin. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about like this concept of ossification or potential upgrades to Bitcoin later on in the segment. But what's really amazing about silent payments is that they're really a user experience improvement. They're a Bitcoin address type that you can use, you can share with anybody, you can post on your Twitter bio, you can post in a GitHub README, and anyone can pay you using a Bitcoin wallet. And when they pay you, they can't see anything but other payments you've received in the past, contrary to like if you just paste a normal Bitcoin address into your Twitter bio, yeah, maybe people can send you some Bitcoin, but they also can just copy and paste that into mempool.space and see all of the funds you've received in the past. Silent payments work differently. So you can have one address. You don't have to change it. You don't have to be worried about address reuse. You can use that broadly and still have good privacy because it makes sure that no one can reuse addresses and no one can just quickly copy and paste that address into a blockchain explorer and see what transactions you received in the past. It doesn't fix all Bitcoin privacy issues, but it's one of those rare things that actually is a user experience improvement as well. Because for those of us who have been in the space for a long time, we're used to the weirdness of when you hit receive in your Bitcoin wallet, you get a new address every time. Or maybe when you actually receive a transaction, you get a new address the next time you hit receive. And that becomes normal for us. But if you hand someone a Bitcoin wallet today, what are they used to? They're used to PayPal, to Cash App, to Venmo, where they have this static address or username, and they can receive funds there. They don't have to worry about it. It doesn't change. It all goes in the same place. And this user experience hurdle of not reusing addresses is definitely a big one to get over. And one of the ways that silent payments really helps. So that's been a blast at Cake Wallet. They were the first to implement silent payments, and it's right now the only Bitcoin wallet that has silent payment support for both sending and receiving. So it's a really, really great way to try out what is kind of the latest and greatest tech in privacy on Bitcoin. As for kind of like, that's kind of the optimism right now. That's one of the really cool tools that's available at the moment. But when we talk about kind of where am I more kind of hesitant or concerned, is something that I think will segue well into another topic of right now, there's a lot of hesitancy in the Bitcoin space to make any changes to Bitcoin, whether those are for self-custody, whether those are for privacy. There's a broad narrative, I wouldn't say prevailing narrative, but there's at least a vocal minority that are firmly against any changes happening to Bitcoin and want to say that Bitcoin is perfect right now as it is. But the concern for me is that we're really at kind of a fork in the road. Right now, Bitcoin can support the self-custody of everyone who uses Bitcoin today, and probably a lot more people. If we're honest, most people who buy Bitcoin aren't actually using Bitcoin anyways. They're using an ETF, they're using an exchange. But what will happen eventually is if enough people do come to Bitcoin and they want to take self-custody, that's going to be pretty much impossible because of the way that Bitcoin handles scaling right now. Limited block size, which has benefits for fees, which we need long-term for security, ultimately limits what we can do with scaling. And Lightning has not proved to be the self-sovereign scaling solution that we initially thought it was. And so we're coming up against this idea of that not too far in the future, if people actually come to Bitcoin and use Bitcoin, not too far in the future, it's going to be very difficult to self-custody and actually hold their own coins. Maybe they can hold keys to eCash or something and then trust a custodian. Maybe they just use a Coinbase account, but that's not actually using Bitcoin. And that's not going to enable the censorship resistance and the privacy and the free to money aspects that people can have. So we're coming to a fork in the road where self-custody is something that we need to find ways to improve. And it's not clear how to do that without improving the Bitcoin protocol itself. And we're also coming to a fork in the road where privacy in Bitcoin is extremely difficult today, almost impossible. And this has gotten much harder in the crackdown on privacy since April of this year, where we saw Samurai Wallet get arrested and indicted and all of their servers shut down. So Samurai Wallet's approach to privacy doesn't work anymore. We saw Tornado Cash developers on Ethereum who are building a very powerful privacy tool on the Ethereum blockchain. Whatever you think of Ethereum, you can just set that aside, but just think about this was a privacy tool that was actually very decentralized and useful. And the developers behind that have been arrested. Case still ongoing in the US. In the Netherlands, one of the developers for Tornado Cash got sentenced to 12 years in jail. Basically another premise that because he knew bad people could use the tool at some point, he was liable for that. And so that crackdown has driven people in Ethereum to look for better privacy. Samurai Wallet being shut down, Wasabi Wallet shutting down their own services as kind of part of the ripple effects of the Samurai Wallet indictment. Lightning wallet providers leaving the US, Lightning service providers leaving the US, like Phoenix. There's been a big shift that made it far more difficult to achieve privacy in Bitcoin. And that's been hard for me as someone who deeply loves privacy and wants to onboard people to privacy tools in Bitcoin, is I don't have a great recommendation right now. And a lot of the solutions to improve privacy on Bitcoin would require an openness to changing the Bitcoin protocol. Now, I'm not advocating that we make Bitcoin Monero, because a lot of the trade-offs that happen with Monero would be very hard for a lot of people in the Bitcoin space to stomach. But there are clear ways that we can improve privacy on Bitcoin using things like covenants that are a broad proposal for fixing self-custody as well. We can build really cool privacy tools like coin pools with covenants, where you can essentially share UTXOs with other people, but have full ownership of your amount of that UTXO, where you can always exit on chain if you want. But all the payments that you make are impossible for anyone to know about except you and the person you're paying, because they're happening within this pool, or you're paying them using this kind of virtual UTXO. Covenants also would improve technologies like Arc and Spark, which also have some better privacy guarantees. So there's a lot that can be done. But right now in the Bitcoin community, we have to decide, what is our end goal? Is our end goal to keep Bitcoin as it is because number is going up? to focus on institutional investors, Federal Reserves, to focus on these number go up aspects. Or while that's happening, I don't think that changes to Bitcoin are going to stop that from happening. While that's happening, keeping our eye on what do we need to do, whether it's just education or whether it's changes to the Bitcoin protocol or whether it's funding development of better privacy tools around Bitcoin. What do we need to do to keep the freedom money angle open for Bitcoin? And I think that that has to be top of mind. And we can't let what seems like a more favorable administration in the US, which usually trickles down into other countries as well, we can't let that disguise the need for freedom money or to hide the fact that nation states are going to want to prevent self-custody and financial privacy long term, because those two things are the antithesis to their control. They shut down the levers that governments have and they give power back to the individual. So I think we need to expect that there will be pushback. Even if this administration is good, maybe that buys us 4 years, but we need to be thinking far into the future and thinking about how we can make Bitcoin better today. And thankfully, there are some really cool tools, like I talked about, like silent payments, which are invaluable for the on-chain side. They're a piece. They don't fix privacy in Bitcoin, but they're an important piece of privacy. That's something you can try out on Cake Wallet today. And then things on the Lightning ecosystem like Bolt 12, which are really, really valuable privacy improvement as well. So there are some ways we can improve privacy today, and broader adoption of those is critical. But we also need to be thinking, how do we make these privacy tools accessible to the average person? And how do we build better privacy tools that give us better on-chain privacy, better privacy in Lightning, an easier point of access to the Lightning network for the average individual without giving up custody? All these things are really top of mind. So there's a lot of different things to break into there. But that's kind of the thought process that I've been going through lately, and interviewing Lop on the Opt Out podcast was really fascinating to get his perspective on how he views this kind of like ossify or don't ossify view. But yeah, those are the kind of top of mind things for me right now, guys.
Incredible, man. It's wow. That it had so many questions, man. So and I saw this in the chat. First of all right, Seth, I apologize because I have to do it. We did break another all-time high while Seth was doing his thing. Satoshi's knocking things over. Satoshi the Bitcoin chicken. But okay, so Seth, this is very, very important, right? And in terms of scaling all the aspects, what's the counter argument to this? Like the ossification camp, why are they not on board with what you suggested?
I think generally the thought process there, and I know you were in Lugano and you saw Jimmy Song and Jameson Lopp debate this. So that's a really good video to go look back on. I don't know if it's on YouTube. I know that they posted it on Twitter at least, but he gave a lot of kind of the arguments that are common in the ossification camp. And just as a primer, ossify is a really weird word. I kind of hate that it's kind of the term that we use around this concept. But basically all that means is naturally long-term, things like Bitcoin that are technologies, and especially things like Bitcoin that are technologies that are also money, are going to get harder and harder to change. So there will be this natural ossification or this natural hardening of the protocol where it's going to get more and more difficult to make changes as we go along. We've already seen that in massive ways since I got into the space in 2017. There seemed to be a real appetite for making improvements, and Taproot was one of those, even though it hasn't panned out to be quite as much as I think it was initially promised. But there was this appetite for changes. But even without a prevailing narrative of we should not change Bitcoin, it's gotten harder and harder to change Bitcoin because there's just so many more people participating in the network, participating in the ecosystem. And so when we look at like what's the main idea behind the ossify now camp, it's really that Bitcoin is serving this goal of digital gold, which has become, I think, the prevailing narrative, especially in the West around Bitcoin. Not globally, but especially in the West around Bitcoin, has been that digital gold is the key use for Bitcoin, and that it's serving that purpose, and that nation state adoption is evidence of that. And that if it's already serving that purpose, we don't want to introduce anything that might affect that might harm that use case as digital gold. And so most of the argument that I see is essentially unknown unknowns. We don't want to introduce anything that might do something that we don't know about. And so it's this concept of if there are unknown unknowns, if we can't be 100% sure that nobody can use this to do something that we don't like, or that this couldn't affect Bitcoin as digital gold in some way, we should never make any changes. And that's the crux of the argument. Obviously, that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but that's the crux of the argument, is that we don't want to harm this digital gold narrative that we have going right now. And we want to make sure that if we're going to change anything in Bitcoin, it's just to preserve that. Things like fixing bugs that are inevitably going to need to be fixed in Bitcoin. Things like quantum resistant cryptography that we would need to protect the idea of self-custody. Those things are the only things that are usually kind of seen within the realm of like, yeah, we should do those because obviously we want Bitcoin to continue to exist in a post-quantum world or in a world past 2140 when this timestamp bug would break Bitcoin. But that's the prevailing view, and that's kind of the view to strawman, and the view that I push back against, and I agree with Jameson Lopp on pushing back against, because I think when we just look at Bitcoin as digital gold, to me that's not freedom money. That's another equity. That's another thing that I can invest in. That's another thing for my 401k, and that's great. That is a great fitting use case, especially for me as a financially privileged Westerner, where I have spare capital that I can put into Bitcoin and that I can benefit from. But when we look at the scope of what Bitcoin can be, I think digital gold is this tiny piece when it comes to actual human freedom. Yes, that's a big piece financially, but when it comes to actual human freedom, that's a tiny piece. And the need much more broadly is not something to put my money into and hope that it appreciates versus fiat over time. But the need for those people is that they need money that they can actually use today, that their governments can't control, that their governments can't inflate away, but I would argue that's different than digital gold, and money that they can use peer-to-peer to transact, to build circular economies and escape the broken fiat system around them. But escaping the fiat system is not putting money into a 401k that's in a Bitcoin ETF and having more fiat at the end of the day. That feeds the fiat system. Mm-hmm. So to me, the critical thing is making sure that when we're talking about like adoption in Africa, we're talking about adoption in South America, that these people are actually able to use Bitcoin and not just use a custodian, not just use a wallet of Satoshi, not just use an eCash where someone that they don't know around the world is holding their Bitcoin for them, but actually be able to use Bitcoin day to day and use it as an escape from fiat slavery, from governmental oppression, to use it to fund journalists and dissidents, to push back on corrupt governments. That's the huge thing for me. And that's why if we get stuck in this digital gold narrative, we lose sight of the human freedom aspects of this. And to add one more thing, and then we can move on. It's been fascinating to see, as I've gotten more and more involved in the Human Rights Foundation and talking to far more journalists and dissidents, talking to more people around the globe on how they're actually using cryptocurrency for freedom. They're not using Bitcoin. They're not using Bitcoin. They're using Tether. They're using things that are centralized and controlled, because what they need is low transaction fees and they need stability. And I'm not saying Bitcoin needs to be a stable coin or anything like that, but just that when we talk about freedom money, a lot of the things that people need are not being served by Bitcoin. And I think we're in danger of freezing Bitcoin as it is today, of not making any changes, not making it easier to self-custody, not making it easier to gain privacy. And we're opting in by doing that to this future where giving up custody is the only path to using Bitcoin in many scenarios.
Yeah, and first of all, that's an incredible kind of summary of the situation, because that is what you're seeing in developing countries, right? The theory of Bitcoiners is like, oh no, like, you know, no. You're seeing Tether adoption, right? There's a percentage of Bitcoin adoption, but you're seeing Tether adoption, and I think it's an educational aspect, and it's also a volatility conversation as well. Now, I think my question to you, Seth, before we talk about the Cake Wallet, because I do want to highlight that, is how would that be possible? Because essentially, like the two camp, the discussion is basically like, how do we scale Bitcoin without introducing a trade-off that potentially exposes Bitcoin. It essentially threatens Bitcoin's decentralization and security, right? Like, how do you introduce that? And I think, you know, Lightning has tried to do that. Fedi has tried to do that. eCash has tried to do that. Liquid has tried to do that. But as you say, right, you know, I don't know about you guys, but like self-custodial Lightning is not a great experience, and I'm a experienced maxi, right? So you know, it's not a great experience. And shout out to the Albi guys, because they've done a great job, and it is getting there. But most people, when they're using Lightning, whether it's the Primal or Wallet of Satoshi, that is non-custodial Lightning, which is a great experience. But as Seth has said, because it's non-custodial, I mean, because it is custodial Lightning, there's a rug pull, right? And if you live in a hostile jurisdiction, For example, the United States is a great example. Wall of Satoshi and Phoenix said, peace, I'm out, right? So yeah, I completely agree. So Seth, that's my question to you. How do you propose, and perhaps there isn't an answer to this yet, right? But can you ever see a situation where, Bitcoin can potentially scale to allow this new influx of people, especially from the global South, coming in, getting the benefits of custodying their own Bitcoin without sacrificing the decentralization and security of the network?
Yes, and we have the technical tools today. That's the crazy part here, is like when we're talking about making self-custody more approachable, or even talking specifically about making Lightning more useful, the thing that we need to do to make those two things happen has been around for years. OpCat is one of the tools that would allow us to essentially think of covenants as building blocks that enable wallet developers to build better tools that allow you to hold on to your funds without having to actually own a single UTXO on chain. You can share that UTXO with other people in a way that is entirely self-custodial, does not have the risk of you not being able to get those funds out. You can always exit back on chain with the amount of that UTXO you control. But we have really, I would kind of narrow it down. There's a lot of different proposals, a lot of different routes that could be taken here, but I would narrow it down to two things that would allow us wallet developers like Cake Wallet to build solutions that allow people to take self-custody in a way that is resistant to fee spikes, that gives a much better user experience in the Lightning Network, and that gives a much better user experience when we're talking long-term storage of Bitcoin. And those things generally are called covenants. They've been proposed for years. OpCTV, which is another really important one, I believe was proposed in 2020 and has been thoroughly vetted since then. OpCat was created by Satoshi and was only disabled because he didn't understand how to fix a denial of service attack that was possible with OpCat at the time. So he disabled it, but the functionality of OpCat is very simple, very well understood. And the combination of something like OpCat and something like OpCTV, which again, you don't need to memorize the names, but it just allows wallet developers or people building protocols like the Arc network, which I'm sure many people have heard of recently, or Spark, which is another kind of layer 2 approach. With these covenants, these tools get immensely easier to use. They get much cheaper to use. The user experience of developers building on these would be drastically better, and the self-sovereignty guarantees get better as well. We can build things like trustless bridges, where when you're bridging into and out of something like Arc or Spark, or more complex things, even like thinking Liquid, you're bridging into and out of these, you can do it in a completely trustless way, rather than having to trust that one out of a set of operators are legitimate, or that a threshold of operators are legitimate. And these two things are very simple, very well understood, possible today, completely achievable, and fix some of the critical issues that I see us coming to a crossroads in Bitcoin. The only issue right now is just a social issue. We just need people to understand that the self-custodial approach to Lightning is very painful right now, and covenants like OpCat and OpCTV would make that drastically easier. We need to understand that actually holding your own UTXOs on chain is not something that's going to happen forever, because fees naturally have to increase for Bitcoin to remain secure. And we can fix these two things today. We have the tools, the code is there, they're well understood. We just have to get people to agree that we need these improvements, and then find exactly the path towards actually activating something like that on Bitcoin. And we're not talking about hard fork. We're not talking about some extremely complex thing on Bitcoin. We're not talking about making Bitcoin Ethereum. These are just very simple building blocks that allow people like Cake Wallet, that allow people like Arc, that allow people like Spark, that allow people like Lightning developers, Phoenix, etc., your favorite Lightning wallet. All of those get better with these building blocks, and they don't open up risk to Bitcoin. They're extremely simple. They're extremely well understood. And the downsides are not really existent at this point, because these things are so simple and so specific. They're to do very specific things and have very specific, well understood trade-offs.
Beautiful, man. You guys go check out Seth for Privacy. Stay on top of this. He has a podcast. It's called the Opt Out Pod. I'm going to drop a link for it for you guys in chat, so you guys could stay basically in the vanguard of this discussion, right? Because I think it's incredibly important, the topics that Seth is bringing up in terms of, yes, Bitcoin is for everyone. How do we do this? Seth is making the case that it is possible. We hear a lot on Bitcoin Twitter that it isn't possible without breaking Bitcoin. Seth is making the case that that isn't the case. So stay up to date with Seth. Go give him a follow on Twitter. Go check out his podcast. I'm sure he's having these discussions. His latest episode, I believe, is with Lop. So I'm going to go hear that after this. Anyways, I do want to talk about the Cake Wallet. Seth, this is the recent company that you joined. You're the VP of Operations. What is the Cake Wallet? Who's it for?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for giving me a little bit of time to highlight this. So yeah, I jumped over to Cake Wallet a couple of months ago as VP of Operations, like you mentioned, because really I wanted the opportunity to be on the cutting edge of privacy in Bitcoin, to be on the cutting edge of user experience in Bitcoin. And I have long been a passionate Monero user. Monero, I think, is an invaluable tool, especially when we're talking payments, that you can make payments very cheaply with fantastic privacy, the best in the space. And so I've been a user of Monero actually longer than I've been a user of Bitcoin. And it's really the Monero community that got me interested in understanding of personal privacy. So Cake Wallet, our core focus is really bringing privacy to the average individual. We want to try to make it as easy and approachable as possible. Monero is a huge part of that, where it's simplest in Monero because the protocol in Monero enforces default privacy for every transaction. But we're talking about Bitcoin as well. Like I said earlier on, we were the first to implement silent payments and still the only one that allows you to receive silent payment transactions directly into Cake. And that ability to be on the cutting edge and to build stuff that I see is immensely important to human freedom has been really awesome. So Cake Wallet, to give the TLDR, it is a multi-cryptocurrency wallet. We have things other than Bitcoin in there. It started as a Monero wallet, but our heavy focus lately has been Bitcoin and will always continue to be Monero as well. And we have exciting things that we're working on right now. We're working on the new Bitcoin usernames proposal, BIP353. I have some exciting ideas on how we can use that within Cake Wallet to let you do things like send money to Seth at sethforprivacy.com using Bitcoin, using silent payments under the hood and Bolt 12 under the hood. And then we also are working on pay join support within Cake Wallet, which is essentially a way where when you send or receive payments, you can work together with the person that you're paying or receiving funds from to make the transaction together. You can think of it kind of like a coin join, but it's not the same. But what it does is it breaks this concept of if these two inputs are spent in the same transaction, they must be owned by the same person. And instead, it hides the amount, it hides what the true input is, and it provides another bump to Bitcoin privacy without actually looking like a privacy tool on chain at Bitcoin. Someone just looking at the transaction can't tell that you were choosing to gain more privacy. It just looks like a standard payment, and it breaks all of the heuristics people or chain surveillance companies are used to for very simple things like the common input ownership heuristic. So those are the things we're working on right now. We try to make it as simple as possible, like I said, to gain privacy on these chains like Bitcoin, like Monero, as well as swapping back and forth. Kind of my thesis for a very long time on how Bitcoin and Monero would be symbiotic is that Bitcoin has proven itself as a store of value. We've talked all episode about that today, that it's proven that is happening. It is a fantastic place to store wealth, but it's not the perfect tool for payments right now, especially with self-custodial Lightning being very difficult, with on-chain payments having no privacy by default, and there not being clear privacy tools to gain that. Monero is a fantastic tool for spending. And so a lot of the thesis that I've always had is that people would store value in Bitcoin and that they would spend Monero. And that has been playing out in real time, especially over the last 12 months. We've seen a massive growth in Bitcoiners starting to use Monero, swapping from Bitcoin into Monero, just a little bit, like enough for a month's spending, and then spending from there. And that's a use case that we explicitly work to serve within Cake Wallet to make it as easy as possible for you to do that. So that's the TLDR, fully open source, of course. I wouldn't touch anything that wasn't 100% open source, that didn't have permissive licenses, that anyone can clone it, can build whatever they want on it, can open pull requests for features that they want. But fully open source, privacy at the core of everything we do, no analytics, no ability for us to see what you do in your wallet. We try to provide ways for you to easily add your own nodes. Like when you're using Bitcoin or Monero or other cryptocurrencies, you can just scan a QR in your Umbrel or something like that to connect directly to your own Bitcoin node so that Cake Wallet doesn't learn anything about your Bitcoin wallets. That's at the core of everything we do is financial privacy and user privacy. So you can be sure that everything that we do is going to be focused heavily on making sure that we learn as little about you as possible and that you reveal as little about yourself to the world as possible, unless you opt to reveal more, which is really the crux of privacy.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this was Simply Bitcoin Live for November 19, 2024. I'm your host, Nico. This is my legendary co-host, Optimus Fields, and our guest today, Seth for Privacy with cakewallet.com. And you can go follow his podcast, Opt Out Pod. He recently just had Jameson Lopp on, so highly recommend checking out that episode. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Smash the like button. Consider subscribing if you feel like we've provided you value. But the number one thing you could do to help push the peaceful Bitcoin revolution forward is share this content. In fact, share all Bitcoin content. Remember, we got to take over the culture, and the way that we do that is one step at a time. All right, guys, love you all. We'll be back tomorrow for another episode of Simply Bitcoin Live.
Brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.